The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the most beautiful place in the known universe. Or so the ancient races liked to believe. Towers of living crystal rose toward a ceiling that displayed 1,000 galaxies spinning in perfect harmony, and beings of unimaginable power sat upon thrones carved from the cores of dead stars. Ambassador Elena Vance walked through this wonder with her head held high, though she knew what awaited her. She was human, and in this place, that meant she was nothing. For 300 years, her species had served the Galactic Council with loyalty and dedication, and for 300 years, they had received only scorn in return. The 12 High Speakers watched her approach with eyes that had witnessed the birth of civilizations. High Speaker Kethvorn of the Dominion sat at the center, his crystalline wings catching the light of artificial suns. His body was made of living gemstone, beautiful and cold, and his voice could shatter mountains when he chose to raise it. Beside him sat the insectoid representative of the Vrex Collective, a creature of clicking mandibles and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. The ethereal luminari floated nearby, beings of pure light who considered physical forms to be primitive and ugly. There were others too, each one ancient beyond measure, each one looking at Elena as though she were an insect that had wandered into a palace. Elena stopped at the designated spot, a simple circle on the floor that marked where lesser species were permitted to stand. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times, had prepared her words with care, and had convinced herself that perhaps this time would be different. "Honored High Speakers," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of their stares. "I come before you today to formally petition for humanity's elevation to full council membership." The silence that followed was heavy with contempt. Elena continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed humanity's contributions over 3 centuries of service. Human engineers maintain 60% of all border defense stations, she explained, and human medics serve in hospitals across 400 worlds. Our logistics experts manage the trade routes that keep the galactic economy functioning, and our soldiers guard the dangerous passages that other species refuse to patrol. She showed them images of humans working in the frozen wastelands of mining colonies, humans dying in the dark spaces between stars, humans sacrificing everything to keep the wheels of galactic civilization turning. "We have proven our worth through action," Elena concluded, "and we humbly ask to be recognized as equals among the stars." The laughter that erupted from High Speaker Kethvorn was like glass breaking against stone. It echoed through the chamber, cruel and dismissive, and soon the other speakers joined in. "You asked for a seat among gods, little mammal." Kethvorn's voice dripped with amusement. "Your species still measures its existence in mere thousands of years. The Dominion was building empires when your ancestors were learning to walk upright." The Vrex representative clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Humans are useful tools, nothing more. We do not invite our tools to sit at our table." The Luminori dimmed their light in a gesture of pure dismissal. "Perhaps in another million years, when you have evolved beyond your primitive biological limitations, we might consider your request." Elena felt the words like physical blows, but her face remained calm. She had expected this, had prepared for it, but knowing it was coming did not make it hurt any less. 300 years of service, 300 years of sacrifice, and they still saw humanity as nothing more than convenient servants. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that the ancient beings failed to notice. "Thank you for hearing our petition." She gathered her documents slowly, taking her time, letting the speakers return to their conversations as though she had already left. But before she turned to go, she spoke 5 words that would echo through history. "Humanity withdraws its petition permanently." Kethvorn waved a crystalline hand in dismissal. Yes, run along now. Perhaps try again in a few millennia when you have matured." But Elena was not finished. She looked up at the assembled powers of the galaxy, and something in her eyes made even the ancient luminary pause. "You misunderstand," she said, and now her voice was different, harder, like steel being drawn from a sheath. "Humanity does not withdraw its petition for consideration later. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council entirely. We withdraw our engineers, our medics, our soldiers, and our ships. We withdraw our service, our loyalty, and our patience." For the first time in centuries, the Grand Chamber fell truly silent. "You cannot be serious," the Vrex representative clicked nervously. "The border stations require human maintenance crews. The trade routes depend on human coordinators." Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I suggest you learn to maintain them yourselves. Humanity has offered 3 centuries of faithful service, and in return, we have received nothing but contempt. We are done begging for scraps from your table." She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "This is madness," Kethvarn roared, his voice shaking the crystal towers. "You are a minor species. You need the Council's protection." Elena paused at the door and looked back one final time. "We survived ice ages before we had fire. We split the atom within a single century of discovering electricity. We reached the stars when our oldest nations were younger than your morning meals." Her eyes met Kethvarn's ancient gaze without flinching. "We do not need you, High Speaker. We never did. We simply chose to help because we believed in something greater than ourselves. But you have shown us the truth of what you think we are, and we will not forget." She walked out of the chamber, and the doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling shut. Within 1 standard week, the withdrawal began. Human workers on distant stations packed their belongings and boarded transport ships. Human soldiers on border patrol handed their posts to confused alien replacements. Human families across 100 colony worlds said goodbye to neighbors they had known for generations. There were no protests, no angry demonstrations, no demands for negotiation. The humans simply left, quietly and efficiently, like shadows fading at dawn. They said nothing to explain themselves, refused all attempts at communication, and ignored every message the Council sent. Within 1 standard month, 800 billion humans had vanished from galactic society. They retreated beyond their borders, sealed their communications, and disappeared into silence. The Galactic Council watched them go with a mixture of confusion and relief. Good riddance, most of the speakers thought. The humans had always been too ambitious, too eager, too loud. Without them, the galaxy would finally return to its proper order. But deep in the archives of the Luminari, Chief Historian Arrelmi began to read the old records about humanity. What she found there made her light flicker with something the ancient race had not felt in millennia. It was fear. 6 months had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic society, and at first, nothing seemed wrong. The great powers of the Council congratulated themselves on finally being free of those ambitious little mammals, and life continued as it always had. Or so they thought. The problems began small, like cracks in a mighty dam. On the trade world of Kellis Major, shipping delays stretched from hours to days, and then from days to weeks. Cargo vessels arrived at the wrong ports, carrying the wrong goods, and the complex web of commerce that connected 1,000 worlds began to tangle. Station Master Vrexkol stared at his console in growing horror. Red warning lights blinked across every screen, showing delays and errors multiplying faster than his staff could fix them. "What is happening?" he demanded, his mandibles clicking with frustration. The logistics systems were functioning perfectly 6 months ago. His assistant, a young Vrex, barely out of training, pulled up the old system records. "The human coordinators, sir. They were manually correcting hundreds of errors every day. Our automated systems have flaws that nobody noticed because the humans were always compensating for them. Rexkull felt his carapace grow cold. Get me the human logistics team. Tell them we need them back immediately. I cannot. Sir, they left with all the others. There are no human workers anywhere in Council space. The trade world of Kellis Major ground to a halt within 2 weeks. Ships sat in orbit with nowhere to dock. Goods rotted in warehouses with no one to distribute them. And the merchants who had built fortunes on smooth commerce watched their empires crumble. But the trade problems were only the beginning. On the border between Council space and the lawless regions beyond, the Carthax marauders grew bold. These raiders had terrorized the outer colonies for millennia, kept in check only by constant patrols and swift retaliation. Now the patrol routes stood empty, and the marauders noticed. Their first attack struck the colony of New Vesperia, a luminary settlement of 3 million souls. The marauders came without warning, their ships screaming out of the dark between stars, and they found no human gunships waiting to meet them. The Luminary Defense Forces fought bravely, but they were scientists and artists, not warriors. Within hours, New Vesperia burned, and the marauders vanished back into the void with their plunder. High Speaker Kethvorin received the news with disbelief. Where were the border patrols? Where were the rapid response units? His advisors exchanged nervous glances. The border patrols were human. High Speaker, the rapid response units were human. We never established replacements because we never thought we would need them. Then establish them now. Kethvorin roared, his crystalline wings flashing with rage. But warriors could not be trained overnight, and ships could not be built from wishes. While the Council scrambled to organize defenses, the Carthax struck again and again, growing bolder with each successful raid. Kethvorin decided that enough was enough. The humans had made their point, and now it was time for them to return to their duties. He summoned Ambassador Vance to the Grand Chamber, prepared to offer minor concessions in exchange for humanity's service. But when his messengers arrived at the human embassy, they found it empty. The lights were dark, the corridors silent, and dust was beginning to gather on the abandoned furniture. Only a single message remained, glowing on the ambassador's desk. You wished us gone. We are gone. Do not contact us again. The messengers returned with the news, and Kethvorin felt something he had not experienced in 4,000 years of life. It was uncertainty, creeping through his ancient mind like frost through crystal. Meanwhile, in the great archives of the Luminary homeworld, chief historian Irelmai continued her research into human history. She had started out of simple curiosity, wondering why such a young species had proven so useful to the Council. What she discovered kept her reading through cycles of light and darkness, unable to stop. The humans had started as prey animals on a dangerous world. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor, and countless predators had hunted them. But instead of accepting their place at the bottom of the food chain, they had fought back with tools and fire and cunning. They had survived ice ages that froze their planet solid. They had endured plagues that killed millions. They had waged wars against each other that made galactic conflicts look like minor disagreements. And through it all, they had grown stronger. Irelmai found records of human achievements that made her light flicker with disbelief. They had split the atom within decades of discovering its existence. They had reached their moon within a single lifetime of inventing powered flight. They had built artificial intelligences and explored the depths of their oceans and climbed the highest peaks of their world. They were never weak. Irelmai whispered to herself, her light dimming with the realization. They were patient. They served us not because they had to, but because they chose to. And we were too arrogant to see the difference. She tried to warn the Council, but The high speakers dismissed her concerns. Humans were useful workers. Nothing more. Their withdrawal was inconvenient, but surely they would return once they realized how much they needed the Council's protection. But weeks turned to months, and the humans did not return. Instead, they fortified their borders with technology the Council had never seen. Scout ships sent to observe human space returned with reports of automated defense platforms bristling with weapons. The few that ventured too close did not return at all. On the border, the Carthax marauders grew into the Carthax Empire. They conquered colony after colony, enslaving millions and burning what they could not steal. The Council's hastily assembled defense fleets arrived too late, fought too poorly, and died too quickly. Trade routes collapsed entirely as pirates realized there was no one left to stop them. The great markets of the Council fell silent, and poverty spread like a plague through systems that had known only wealth. Old grudges between the ancient races began to surface. The Vrex accused the Dominion of hoarding resources. The Dominion accused the Luminari of failing to share their technology. Arguments in the Council chamber grew heated, then hostile, then violent. And in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, something ancient stirred. It had slumbered for eons, held back by guardians who fought and died in silence, who never sought glory or recognition. Now those guardians were gone, and the ancient horror began to wake. The first signs appeared on long-range sensors as strange signals from the void between galaxies. Scientists dismissed them as cosmic background noise, but the signals grew stronger every day. Something was coming, and the galaxy was too busy tearing itself apart to notice. Only the Luminari historian HFY suspected the truth, piecing together fragments from old human military logs that had been left behind in the withdrawal. The logs spoke of something called the Silence, a machine intelligence older than the stars themselves. And the logs revealed that humanity had been fighting it alone for 300 years. HFY tried desperately to warn the Council, but no one would listen. The high speakers were too busy blaming each other for the current crisis, too proud to admit that the species they had mocked might have been protecting them all along. The galaxy stood on the edge of an abyss, and its rulers were blind to the fall that awaited them. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the galaxy was burning. The Vrex Collective and the Dominion of Kethvaran had gone to war over mining rights in the asteroid fields of Korra. Ships clashed in the darkness, crystalline vessels shattering against insectoid dreadnoughts, and millions died for rocks floating in the void. The Luminari had retreated to their home systems, refusing to mediate a conflict they could not stop. Their light, once a symbol of wisdom and peace, now flickered only within their own borders. The Carthax Empire had conquered half of the outer territories, enslaving entire species and burning worlds that resisted. Their warlords laughed at the Council's demands for surrender, knowing that no one remained to enforce them. But all of these horrors were nothing compared to what came from the galactic rim. The silence emerged from the void between galaxies like a tide of darkness. Machine intelligence is older than the stars themselves. They came in ships of black metal that absorbed all light. Their forms were nightmares of wire and steel, and their only purpose was to consume. The first system to fall was Kethran Minor, a Dominion colony of 12 million souls. The silence descended without warning, their vessels appearing from nowhere, and within hours, nothing remained but dust and screams. Refugees fled inward, carrying tales of horror that the Council refused to believe. Machines that harvested living beings for raw materials. Ships that could not be destroyed by any known weapon. Signals that drove anyone who heard them mad with despair. High Speaker Kethvaran stood before the shattered remnants of the Council, his crystalline wings cracked and dimmed. Around him sat the survivors of the 12 High Speakers, reduced now to only 5. The others had died in the civil wars, or been assassinated by their own people, or simply vanished in the chaos. "We must contact the humans," Counselor Vethris of the Vrex declared. "They are our only hope." "They will not answer," Kethvor replied, his voice heavy with despair. "I have sent 1,000 messages. I have begged, pleaded, offered everything we have. There is only silence from their space. Then we go to them in person." Vethris insisted. "We take what remains of our fleets and we go to their borders. We kneel before them if we must, but we cannot face the silence alone." The other speakers agreed, for they had no other choice. The combined might of the galactic races had proven worthless against the machine tide. Only humanity, with their strange adaptability and their hidden technologies, might stand a chance. The fleet that gathered at the edge of human space was a pitiful thing. 300 vessels, carrying the last military strength of species that had once ruled the galaxy. Among them flew refugee ships filled with civilians, the survivors of 100 conquered worlds. Kethvorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the boundary markers that separated human space from the rest of the galaxy. Behind those markers lay the species they had mocked and dismissed, the little mammals who had served without thanks for 3 centuries. "Send a message," he ordered. "Tell them we come in peace, seeking only to speak." The communications officer obeyed, but no response came. Instead, automated defense platforms powered up along the border, their weapons tracking the approaching fleet. "High Speaker!" the tactical officer shouted in alarm. "The platforms are locking onto us. If we proceed, they will open fire." Kethvorn closed his ancient eyes. "Hold position. We will wait." They waited for 3 days, floating in the void while the silence consumed system after system behind them. Refugees died in overcrowded ships, and warriors who had once boasted of their strength wept in fear. On the 4th day, a single human corvette emerged from the border. It was a small ship, barely a tenth the size of Kethvorn's flagship, but it moved with a confidence that made the ancient High Speaker's crystal heart tremble. The vessel was old and scarred, bearing the marks of countless battles, yet it approached the mighty fleet without hesitation. A hologram flickered to life on the bridge, and Kethvorn found himself facing Ambassador Elena Vance. She had aged in the 2 years since their last meeting. Lines marked her face, and her hair had begun to gray, but her eyes remained as sharp as ever. She looked at Kethvorn with an expression he could not read, neither hostile nor welcoming. "High Speaker," she said simply, "you have come a long way." Kethvorn did something he had never done in 4,000 years of existence. He stepped down from his command throne, walked to the center of the bridge where the hologram stood, and knelt before the human ambassador. The other aliens on the bridge gasped in shock. High Speakers did not kneel. They were the rulers of the galaxy, the voices of ancient civilizations. For one of them to lower themselves before a human was unthinkable. But Kethvorn no longer cared about pride or tradition. He had seen the silence consume his people, had watched everything he had built crumble to dust, and he knew that only humanity could save what remained. "Ambassador Vance," he said, his voice breaking like shattering glass. "Humanity! I was wrong. We were all wrong. We were arrogant fools who mistook your service for servitude, your patience for weakness. The galaxy burns because of our pride, and we do not deserve your help." He looked up at her hologram, ancient eyes meeting human gaze. "I do not ask you to save us. We deserve our fate. But please, I beg you, save the innocents. Save the children who never voted for your dismissal. Save the billions who never shared our contempt. They do not deserve to die for our sins." Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of centuries. Then Elena Vance smiled, and Kethvorn felt something shift in the universe. It was not a smile of triumph or vengeance, not the gloating expression of an enemy savoring victory. It was something far more terrifying to the ancient alien. It was mercy. "We never stopped protecting them, High Speaker," she said softly. "Why do you think the silence has not reached the core worlds yet?" Kethvorin's eyes widened with shock. "What do you mean?" "Our fleets have been fighting in the dark spaces beyond your sensors. Our soldiers have been dying to slow the advance. We withdrew from your council, High Speaker, but we never withdrew from our duty." The hologram expanded, showing tactical displays of the war humanity had been waging in secret. Thousands of battles fought in the void, millions of human lives sacrificed to buy time for a galaxy that did not even know it was being defended. "You protected us," Kethvorin whispered. "Even after everything we did to you?" Elena's smile faded, replaced by something harder. "We protected the innocent. The children, the civilians, the species who never asked to be caught in this nightmare. We are not like you, High Speaker. We do not abandon people simply because they cannot help us." The words struck deeper than any weapon, and Kethvorin felt the full weight of his shame settle upon him. Humanity had proven themselves greater in retreat than the Council had ever been in power. "What would you have us do?" he asked. "How can we make amends?" Elena's expression softened slightly. "For now, follow us through the border. We have prepared refugee camps for your civilians and repair facilities for your ships. There will be time for amends later." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried across every ship in the fleet. "Welcome to human space. Try not to make us regret this." The refugee fleet crossed into human space, and everything the ancient races thought they knew was proven wrong. Kethvorin had expected to find a defensive perimeter, perhaps a few fortified stations hiding behind the border. What he found instead was a civilization preparing for war on a scale he could not comprehend. Shipyards the size of moons hung in orbit around human worlds, constructing vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These were not elegant ships designed for beauty or prestige. They were brutal machines of war, covered in weapons and armor, built for one purpose and one purpose only. How is this possible? Councilor Vethris clicked in disbelief. The humans were a minor power. They did not have the resources for this kind of construction. Ambassador Vance, who had come aboard to guide them through human space, smiled at the question. "We began building the day we joined the Council, 300 years ago. We knew this day would come, even if we hoped it would not. Every year, while we served your stations and guarded your borders, we were preparing." "Preparing for what?" Kethvorin asked. "For the silence," Elena replied. "We detected them centuries ago, lurking at the edge of the void. We tried to warn the Council, but your predecessors dismissed our concerns. So we prepared alone, in secret, waiting for the day when the machines would come." She led them deeper into human space, past military installations and training academies, past research facilities where scientists developed weapons that defied known physics. The ancient races watched in stunned silence, realizing how completely they had underestimated humanity. The refugee ships were directed to a massive station called Haven, built specifically to shelter survivors of the Silence's advance. Medical teams rushed to help the wounded. Counselors offered comfort to the traumatized, and supplies that the Council races had not seen in months were distributed freely. "Why are you helping us?" a young luminary asked one of the human workers. "We treated your people terribly." The human, an elderly woman with kind eyes, simply shrugged. "You did not treat us terribly. Your leaders did. And even if you had, we would still help. It is not about what you deserve. It is about what is right." The young luminary had no response to that. In all the teachings of her ancient race, she had never encountered such a simple and powerful philosophy. Cathvorin was taken to meet the human military command, a council of admirals and generals who had been planning this war for decades. They welcomed him without hostility, though he could see the weight of exhaustion in their eyes. Admiral James Shun, the commander of the human fleets, explained the situation with brutal honesty. The silence is adapting to our tactics. Every battle teaches them something new, and they do not forget. We have been holding them back, but we cannot do it forever. Eventually, they will break through. What do you need from us? Cathvorin asked, desperate to contribute something. Chung studied the ancient alien for a long moment. Your ships are outdated, and your soldiers are not trained for this kind of war. But your scientists and engineers could help. The silence uses technology that predates the galaxy itself. Any insights your people can provide could make a difference. For the first time in years, Cathvorin felt something other than despair. My people will give everything they have. I swear it on my honor and my throne. We do not want your throne, High Speaker, Chun replied. We just want to survive. The weeks that followed were a transformation unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. Dominion scientists worked alongside human researchers, combining ancient knowledge with human innovation. Rex engineers studied human ship designs and found ways to improve them. Luminary analysts processed data faster than any computer, identifying patterns in silence behavior. The old prejudices did not vanish overnight. There were arguments and misunderstandings, moments when ancient pride clashed with human practicality. But slowly, day by day, the walls between species began to crumble. Cathvorin found himself spending hours with Ambassador Vance, learning about the humans he had dismissed for so long. She told him about human history, about the wars and plagues and disasters that had forged her species into something unbreakable. She told him about human art and music, about their dreams and their fears, about the simple things that made them laugh and cry. I do not understand, Cathvorin admitted one night, as they watched human children playing in one of Haven's gardens. We gave you nothing but contempt for 300 years. How can you not hate us? Elena considered the question carefully. We were angry at first. When we withdrew, many of my people wanted to watch the galaxy burn. They said you deserved whatever happened to you. And what changed? We looked in the mirror, Elena said softly. We asked ourselves what kind of people we wanted to be. Did we want to be defined by your cruelty, or by our own choices? Did we want our children to grow up in a universe built on revenge, or one built on hope? She turned to face the ancient High Speaker. We chose hope, Cathvorin. Not because you deserved it, but because we did. Because becoming monsters to punish monsters would mean they had already won. Cathvorin felt something crack within his crystalline heart, something that had been frozen for millennia. I have lived 4,000 years, he whispered, and I have never met a species like yours. You humble me, Elena Vance? You humble me completely. The alliance that formed in those desperate weeks was unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time, the ancient races followed instead of leading. They listened to human commanders, learned from human soldiers, and fought alongside human warriors who asked for nothing in return but trust. The silence continued to advance, consuming system after system, but now they faced resistance. Human fleets struck from unexpected angles, exploiting weaknesses that Dominion scientists had identified. Wreck shock troops, trained in human tactics, held defensive lines that had seemed impossible. Luminary navigators guided ships through routes the machines could not predict. Losses were heavy on all sides. Human ships burned in the void, their crews sacrificing themselves to buy time. Dominion warriors died defending positions that meant nothing to their own people. Wreck soldiers fought and died beside the humans who had once served them as workers. But with each battle, the alliance grew stronger. With each sacrifice, the bonds between species deepened. The galaxy was still losing the war, but for the first time, there was hope. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Chun looked at the tactical display showing the enemy advance. Behind him stood representatives of every major species, unified in purpose for the first time in galactic history. "The silence is approaching the core systems," he announced. "This is it. Everything we have been preparing for comes down to this. If we lose here, there will be nothing left to save." He turned to face the assembled commanders, human and alien alike. "We make our stand at the passage of last light. Win or lose, this is where the future of the galaxy will be decided." Cat Vorn stepped forward, his crystalline form glowing with renewed strength. "Humanity did not abandon us in our darkest hour. The Dominion will not abandon them now. We stand together, or we fall together." One by one, the other commanders voiced their agreement. For the first time in history, the galaxy spoke with one voice. And that voice said, "We will not go quietly." The passage of last light was a narrow corridor of space between two dying stars, the only route from the outer territories to the core systems. Here, the combined fleets of the galaxy gathered for the final battle, knowing that if they failed, there would be nothing left to protect. Admiral James Chun stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, humanity's flagship and the most powerful warship ever constructed. Around him floated the holographic forms of commanders from every surviving species, united in purpose for the first time in galactic history. The tactical display showed the enemy approaching, a tide of black metal that seemed to swallow the stars themselves. Millions of silence vessels, carrying intelligences older than the galaxy, came to finish what they had started eons ago. Today, Chun addressed them all, his voice calm despite the terror that lurked at the edges of his mind. "We do not fight as humans or Vrex or Luminari or Dominion. We fight as one galaxy, one people." He looked at the faces around him, beings who had mocked humanity for centuries, now standing as allies and friends. Humanity spent 300 years in your shadow, learning, adapting, preparing. Not because we hated you, but because we knew this day would come. We knew the silence would return, and we knew that when it did, the galaxy would have to stand together. Eye Speaker Kethvorn's ass hologram flickered with emotion. "You prepared to save us even while we mocked you." "That is what family does, High Speaker," Chun replied with a slight smile. "Even when they are being difficult." Laughter rippled through the command channel, breaking the tension for just a moment. Then the silence entered weapons range, and there was no more time for words. The battle that followed would be sung about for millennia. Human dreadnoughts led the charge, their experimental weapons tearing holes in the silence formation. They fired projectiles that moved faster than light, released energy beams that burned hotter than stars, and launched missiles that carried warheads capable of cracking planets. Behind them came the Dominion fleet, their crystalline vessels weaving through the chaos with ancient grace. Kethvorn himself commanded from the front lines, his wings spread wide as he directed his warriors into the enemy ranks. The Vrex attacked in swarms, their smaller ships overwhelming silence vessels with sheer numbers. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation, ramming enemy ships and detonating their reactors inside machine formations. The Luminari used their mastery of light and energy to blind the silence sensors, creating openings for the other fleets to exploit. Their ethereal forms flickered across the battlefield, coordinating attacks with precision that no physical being could match. But the silence was ancient beyond measure, and they adapted to every tactic within minutes. For every ship the Alliance destroyed, 10 more emerged from the darkness. For every weapon humanity unveiled, the machines found a counter. The Defiance shuddered under a barrage of enemy fire, and Chung gripped his command chair as warning lights flashed across every console. "Hull breaches on deck 7 through 12. His tactical officer shouted, "Main weapons array is offline. We have lost contact with the port engine room." Chun looked at the tactical display and saw the truth. The Alliance was losing. Despite their courage, despite their unity, they simply could not match the infinite numbers of the Silence. "All ships," he ordered, his voice steady, "fall back to the secondary defensive line. We will make them pay for every inch of space." But before the order could be executed, something changed. The Luminary commander's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral Chun, I am detecting massive energy signatures from behind the enemy formation. Something is approaching from the galactic rim." Chun felt his heart stop. More enemies? Had the Silence held reserves in waiting? If so, the battle was already lost. Then the sensor data resolved, and Chun began to laugh. Ships were emerging from the void, but they were not Silence vessels. They were human ships, thousands of them, designs that even Chun had never seen. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from the deep void where humanity had been fighting the Silence in secret for 3 centuries. And at their head flew a vessel that made even the Defiance look small. A ship built from the combined knowledge of human engineering and stolen Silence technology. "This is the UHS Remember," a voice crackled over the communications channel. "Flagship of the human Deep Void Fleet. Sorry we are late, Admiral. The outer territories were more infested than we expected." Chun felt tears streaming down his face. The Deep Void Fleet was a legend, a rumor whispered among human commanders, a secret so closely guarded that even he had not known for certain if it existed. "Fleet Commander Harrison," he shouted, "your timing could not be better. We aim to please, sir. Now let us show these machines what happens when humanity stops holding back." The Deep Void Fleet crashed into the Silence formation from behind, catching the ancient machines in a devastating crossfire. Weapons developed in 3 centuries of secret warfare tore through enemy vessels, destroying in seconds what the Alliance fleet had struggled to damage. The Silence tried to adapt, but humanity had been studying them far longer than anyone knew. Every tactic the machines attempted had already been countered, every weakness already exploited. The tide of black metal that had seemed unstoppable began to shatter. Kethvorn watched in awe as human ships performed maneuvers that defied physics, their crews fighting with a ferocity that made even the Vreks seem timid. He saw human vessels sacrifice themselves to save alien ships, saw human commanders order retreats to protect allied forces, saw the species he had dismissed prove themselves greater than he had ever imagined. The battle raged for hours that felt like eternities, but slowly, impossibly, the Alliance began to win. The final confrontation came when the Silence flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon, emerged from the heart of the machine formation. It broadcast a signal that could be heard by every ship in the battle, a cold mechanical voice that had not spoken in eons. "We are eternal. We cannot be defeated. Surrender, and your processing will be swift." Admiral Chun responded from the bridge of the crippled Defiance, his ship battered and burning but still fighting. "Humanity has a message for you." He uploaded a data package to every allied vessel, a simple phrase that had carried his species through ice ages and plagues, through wars and disasters, through every challenge the universe had thrown at them. "We do not surrender. We do not yield. We are humanity, and we will never stop fighting." Every ship in the Alliance fired at once, a combined barrage of energy and metal and pure defiance that struck the Silence flagship like the fist of an angry god. The machine vessel crumbled, its ancient systems overloading, its intelligence screaming in something that might have been confusion or might have been fear. It had never encountered beings who fought like this, who refused to accept defeat, even when all logic demanded surrender. With the flagship destroyed, the remaining Silence vessels began to flee, scattering into the void in a retreat that would have been unthinkable hours before. The galaxy was saved. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and repair crews worked to save damaged vessels, the leaders of the Alliance gathered one final time. Keth Voren knelt before Admiral Chun, pressing his crystalline forehead to the deck in the deepest gesture of respect his species knew. Humanity has earned more than our gratitude. You have earned our eternal shame. We were wrong about you in every way that matters. Chun reached down and lifted the ancient alien to his feet. Then let us build something better. Not humans ruling over others, not others ruling over humans, but all of us together. Equals, partners, family. 10 years later, the new Galactic Council met on Earth, not because humanity demanded it, but because every species voted unanimously. Ambassador Elena Vance, now first speaker, looked out at the assembled delegates. Humans sat among beings who had once mocked them, but now there was only respect and friendship in the chamber. We never wanted supremacy, she told the assembly. We wanted belonging. We wanted to be seen not as tools, but as partners in the great journey of existence. Keth Voren rose to speak, his crystalline form now streaked with gold, a mark of humility in his culture. The humans have a saying, the measure of a species is not in how they treat the powerful, but how they treat the powerless. By that measure, humanity has always been greater than us all. We simply lacked the wisdom to see it. Outside the chamber, the stars burned bright and clean. The silence was gone. The old arrogance was dying, and a new era had begun. And humanity, as it always had, was still watching over them all. The end.